Welcome, everybody, to the Grueling True Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and today we're going to do a little Sports History 101 again. We're going to talk about the greatest sports upset in the history of the United States, because let's face it, there's a couple massive soccer ones. Soccer's not an actual sport. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to introduce my co-host for this show, Serhan Dayi. How you doing, Serhan?
What's going on, Mike? What's going on, everybody?
And remember, you can follow us at X or on X at Grueling Truth. You can get all of our shows on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, on over 300 different outlets. You can pick up the Grueling Truth. So wherever you find Sportscast, you'll find us. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe button on YouTube. All right. Now, Serhan, I see you posting because we got the Mike Tyson fans, who are probably the most illiterate fans outside of Deontay Wilder in sports. And you made the claim that you thought Buster Douglas upsetting Mike Tyson was the greatest sports upset of all time. I would say it's number two. I think it's the 1980 Olympic hockey team winning a gold medal, which I think was a much bigger upset. And we're going to discuss that today. And we're also going to discuss some other great upsets. Maybe we'll just touch on a few in each sport. And number one, Serhan, do you know how the word upset got attributed to a big upset in sports?
I don't know. I need a little education about it.
Oh, man. All right. Have you ever heard of the horse Man of War?
Yes.
All right. Man of War, 1919 was unbeatable. There was a horse that was named Upset. That is the only horse that ever beat Man of War. That's why you have the historic where they call everything an upset. So it actually came from a horse race, Serhan. I thought you would know that. Come on.
I remember the Man of War being upset. I didn't the whole horse riding scenario. I didn't know that's where it spun off to. But I remember the upset reading about it when I was talking to those who follow me. Know I talk about upsets this time of year. I didn't mention it, but I didn't know it was spun off to that. I don't acknowledge that part. I know the upset. I didn't know it was spun off to the way it was today.
So why don't you go ahead and talk about maybe 3 or 4 upsets that you've seen, not necessarily would be in the top 2, but just upsets that you saw that you would like to bring up.
Well, the first one I'd like to talk about is what took place in 2018 when UMBC beat Virginia in the college basketball tournament. Because in my time, it was proverbial. No 16 was ever going to beat a number 1. And that happens. Is the fact that happened. It happened they blew them out by 20. And back then it was like no 16 was ever going to beat a number 1. Because you would talk about bracket busters in college basketball. There was probably one of the top ones because everyone had at that point Virginia in their brackets. But not only that never happened, it happened that year in 2018. Plus it spun off to 2023 where I can't remember who the team was that upset Purdue as the number 1 seed.
St. Peter's. And they made it all the way to what? The Sweet 16 or Elite 8, if I remember right.
Sweet 16. Yeah, that's who it was. Because remember, back then, I remember the overall consensus was no 16 was going to beat a number 1. And so we have this 2 in the last 5 years. And all of a sudden, we're having bracket busters all over the place. And now everyone's so nervous to want to play a bracket in college basketball tournament time as a result. So I do remember those 2 in the more modern times. Maybe some of the other ones, of course, was the Mets over the Red Sox in 86. Of course, everybody knows that for the Bill Bartner play, but Red Sox had ample opportunities to win it, but couldn't, and the Mets just capitalized. I recall that one. Of course, I remember another one would be the more recent one is Super Bowl 42, where the Patriots going for perfection, and then Eli Manning happened. Of course, that catch to the top of the head by David Tyree, where you knew something was about to happen. So I remember that one, and of course, maybe in boxing, who knows that's my sport. I know we're going to talk about Tyson and Douglas. I'll leave that out for a second. The only other ones that come to my mind when I think about it, we're both in the heavyweight division. We talk about Cassius Clay stunning Sonny Liston, and of course, Cinderella Man James J. Braddock beating Max Baer. And maybe some more modern times of boxing, Julio Cesar Chavez losing to Frankie Randall when he had that long unbeaten streak, which after the Whitaker fight, Chavez started to fall off the rails and Frankie Randall capitalized. So that was one up there for me. And I could point to a lot of others, and, but some of the ones of my time, we see it like once or twice. It comes to a point to where you almost want to say you're not shocked anymore. Because when I see both of these, and everybody calls it the greatest upset ever, I have to remind people of some of the ones I've seen, and that's why we have this particular word. And what you and I are about to talk about, maybe two of the gold standards that raise a bar when it comes to upsets that we're probably never going to see ever again.
Yeah, and the ones I would bring up that I've seen, because I am obviously much older than you, would be 1985 Villanova beats Georgetown. The thing about that upset, though, that most people don't remember is those two teams played twice earlier in the season, and Georgetown won by 9 the first time. The second time they played, the game actually went to like double overtime or overtime. So they were both close games. And as you know, there's a lot of upsets in conference play, no matter what conference it is. The teams knew each other, but that's a game where Villanova, I think, shot 90% in the second half and like 70% for the game. And
Yeah,
that Georgetown team might have been the greatest defensive team in college basketball history. Of course, the other would be Jim Valvano, the 1983 NC State Wolfpack team. And the thing about them is that was an upset for them just to make the tournament, because they had
yeah,
to win the ACC tournament and upset North Carolina and Virginia just to get to the tournament. And once they get to the tournament, the first round they played Pepperdine. They were down 7 points with a minute left, came all the way back, won in double overtime, and then they upset Virginia by a point. And then in the Final Four, they beat Georgia, who had upset North Carolina. And then, of course, you got the shot, or we'll call it a long pass at the end of the
yeah.
game that Lorenzo
The
Charles
30 foot
dunked.
30 foot shot by, I think it was Lorenzo Charles, if I'm correct.
Yeah, Lorenzo Charles.
Uh, uh,
I think
uh, uh,
Sidney
uh,
Lowe shot the
yeah,
ball.
Cindy Lou shot it. Then Lorenzo Charles put it back. That was the Jimmy Balvano looking for a hug game. I remember.
Yeah, I remember I lost a bet because I was actually cheering for Houston because I really liked Phi Slamma Jam. I think I was like an eighth grader. And I know that for some reason, my gym teacher bet me a Coke that, NC State would win. So that was back in the early 80s. It took a while to come up with the 50 cents for a Coke. Hard to believe it was 50 cents.
I
All
remember those
right.
days.
So let's just go ahead and get to the main event. We got Mike Tyson against Buster Douglas. We got the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. If you want, you can make your case that Tyson Douglas was the biggest, and then I'll destroy it right after that.
It probably wouldn't take much for you.
We'll see.
Well, I personally admit I'll always be biased because everybody knows me. This is my heart right here, and I'll always be biased toward it. I just think because of what Buster Douglas went through with the passing of his mom 21 days before the fight, and then having to try to try to take all that in, and going against perception wise, the so called baddest man on the planet who was wiping everybody out and had a guaranteed $25 million payday to fight Evander Holyfield 4 months later. And given what happened to Buster Douglas 3 years before when he fought Tony Tucker, he was perceived as a quitter.
Hey,
That
real
was
quick,
where.
we got to say yo
Oh,
to Robert from Vero. How you doing, Robert? Go ahead,
what's up,
Serhan.
Robert?
Sorry about that.
But yeah, we think about everything that he went through and what from losing to Tony Tucker, perceived as a quitter, to losing his mom just weeks before the fight, and even in the middle of that, having the mother of his child not in the greatest of health, and everything that's happened to him outside of the ring, and perception wise, as the baddest man on the planet as Mike Tyson was, and the odds, which was they said it was 42-1, which honestly I think 42-1 was just a number just for the sake of throwing it out there, and not the fact that he did it. It was more or less how he did it. Just aside of that eighth round knockdown, which Tyson fans like to cry a long count over, which was a long count that wasn't. And the fact he did it so effortlessly, that's why I think it would have that as my greatest upset, due to the fact that, you know, Mike Tyson had the so called stranglehold of the heavyweight division, at least perception wise, till it got hot. And then here comes Buster Douglas out of nowhere, going everything that he went through outside of the ring with his personal tragedy, just be able to suck it up against every odd imaginable and just doing what he did that night. That's why I always tilt the nod toward Buster Douglas over Mike Tyson
All
as
right.
the greatest upset.
So I can tell you this: the thing that makes it not as big an upset in retrospect, it was something that was shown on the HBO show before the fight, if I remember right, was Greg Page, who was a very good heavyweight contender in the early '80s,
He
mid
was.
'80s. had some issues that he caused himself, which was a big thing with heavyweights in the 1980s, causing themselves issues. Whether it was Tim Witherspoon with Don King, Tony Tubbs with food. I mean, there was a ton of guys here that had issues. And Greg Page put Mike Tyson on the deck, a couple weeks before that fight. And they actually
Yes.
showed the video footage before it where he had gotten knocked down. So to me, I think there's a lot of upsets when you look at them that are still big upsets, but in the long run, and I'll get to that in a second, Robert, and I'll put your comment up in a second. But I mean, I think the big thing is when you look back, you can see where maybe it wasn't quite as big an upset as you thought it would be. Super Bowl IV, Kansas City, Minnesota. It was 16, 18-point underdog was Kansas City. When you look back now, Kansas City was definitely the better team. Super Bowl III, Earl Morrall was a really good quarterback, but they were still playing with their backup. They didn't have Johnny Unitas. And that Jets team, especially defensively, which gets undersold, was really good. Now, I think when you look at this, you see he went to Don King. He got ready, all the excuses that he always makes.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is this, you brought up Douglas Tyson because it was boxing and that was your first love. And really, back at that time, it was mine too. I'm going to bring up Robert Stewart's comment real quick. He says the Milan basketball team winning the greatest tournament in IHSA basketball tournament history in 1954. That would be, to me, number two. It wouldn't even be Mike Tyson. I mean, do you know the story of 1954 Milan?
I've heard bits and pieces of it.
Have you ever seen the movie Hoosiers?
Yes.
Okay, it's based on, not strictly with it, but it's based on the 1954 Milan basketball team. And what you had a school with 72 boys in it that basically went through the Indiana high school basketball tournament. Back there was like 700 or 800 teams, and they actually made it all the way to the championship game. In the semifinal, they beat Oscar Robertson and Crispus Attucks. And then, of course, Robertson the next 2 years would win it all with Crispus Attucks. He would be the first all-black team to win the Indiana State High School Basketball Championship. And with Milan, you had a school with 115 kids in it playing Muncie Central, which was a school with over 2,500 kids in it. And Milan wins the game at the end. They stall the last 4 minutes. Bobby Plump drives, hits the shot. That would be my number two. But the reason the Olympic ice hockey team is number one is a myriad of reasons. Number one is hockey. And it's still the greatest sporting event I ever saw in my life. And when I watched that, I remember that day, the game was not shown live. And the reason it wasn't shown, it was shown at 5 o'clock. It was tape delay broadcast at 8. And what happened was the United States Olympic Committee actually asked to have the game moved to 8 o'clock. The Russian Federation said no, because an 8 o'clock at night game would mean the Russian fans would watch it at 4 o'clock in the morning instead of 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, you're a Russian, you're not allowed to do anything but what you're fucking told anyways. So, I mean, do you really care what time it is?
Right.
But they played a game at 5. And I remember being at school that day, and it's all anybody talked about. And in art class, we're all drawing up American flags to wave at the TV. All right. They're doing USA chants in the hall. And then that game comes. And I remember I went home. The game started at 5. I remember I turned off all TVs, all radios, and I waited till 8 o'clock. And I watched that game. And it's one of the few sporting events, and I was only like 6th grade at the time, where I actually cried at the end of that game. That game was so important to everybody in this country, just because the Iran hostage crisis. You had Jimmy Carter screwing up the economy. This country was down on its luck. And the thing about this upset, though, is this wasn't a heavyweight champion getting beat by a heavyweight challenger. This was amateur kids beating professional guys. I mean, this was a professional team. And I think I'm just going off the top of my head. So if I'm wrong here, I'm wrong here. But from 1960, when the U.S. had the Olympic miracle at Squaw Valley in California, where they upset the Czechoslovakian team and the Russian team to win the gold medal, they'd played 20 hockey matches against the Russians. They were outscored in those 12 games, 122-17. They lost all 12. The U.S. Olympic hockey team, on top of that, played the Russians 2 weeks before in Madison Square Garden and got beat 10-3 in a game that, if you actually watch that game, was much worse than 10-3. So to me, the comparison for Douglas Tyson would be Mike Tyson knocked out Buster Douglas in 35 seconds, and then they gave him a rematch a month or two later, and Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas. That would be the comparison to me. On top of that, you had the Americans were 1,000-1 underdogs to lose the gold medal. We're not talking 42-1. Now, the 1,000-1, nobody really knows because you weren't allowed to bet on sporting events. But if you remember Sonny Vaccaro, the big Vegas insider, he said that nobody bet on him, but he said if it would have been 1,000-1. And when I got a chance to talk to Al Michaels probably 10 or 11 years ago, right when I started this show, basically. And he said that him and Ken Dryden going to the game talked about how they hoped the game was just like 3-1 or 4-1 at the end of the second period so people would still watch. The other thing about it is I think the Russians outshot the Americans 39-16. Clear shots on goal, which are shots that usually go in. The United States was outshot 36-6. But 4 of those American goals went in. I mean, you had basically they were behind 3 times until they finally took the lead on a Ruzioni's goal. And the things that happened after that, like my dad never watched. He didn't want to watch hockey. He thought hockey was stupid. He liked baseball, football, basketball. All right. He didn't even watch. He already knew what happened in the game because he watched the news. I remember while I'm screaming in my room, watching on my little 13-inch TV, I mean, I promise you, don't tell me what happened. But I've been there screaming at, and they're watching an episode of Dallas on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever it was. But I do remember this. The other thing about it was Buster Douglas was the champion once he beat Mike Tyson.
Mhm.
The United States Olympic hockey team were not champions when they beat them.
Yeah, that's one thing people forget. It wasn't the gold medal game. It was a game before it. I think it was after that. I think it was Finland they beat to win the gold medal that year.
They beat Finland to win the gold medal 4-2. In a game they were down 2-1 going to the third period. But on top of that, the U.S. beating Russia, if the U.S. would have lost to Finland, it was possible they wouldn't even have gotten a medal because the Russians had an extra point going into it because they went undefeated in the qualifying matches where the United States had the one tie against Sweden. The other thing is the U.S. were like plus 50, or I think it was like plus 2,000 to beat the Czechoslovaks in their second preliminary game. And they won that game 7-2. They were a plus 1,500 underdog against Sweden in the first game that they tied 2-2. And also, put it like this. This will be in history books, American history books, 200 years from now. We'll still, if we're all still here, which we probably won't be, because let's face it, we're all going to hell quick. But if this country and this world is still here 200 years from now, the 1980 Olympic hockey team will be in that book. Buster Douglas won't be in that book. What I'm saying is this. What Buster Douglas did transcended boxing.
It did.
What the American hockey team did basically was above everything.
It transcended American sports and American culture almost when you think about it.
And the other thing is that Sunday game where they played Finland, I think started at like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And everybody watched that. My dad watched that. We cheered for it. They won. And then everybody tuned in 5 hours later after after the Russians beat Sweden 9-2. And everybody watched. This little podium somehow fit 20 dudes up there while, they had their fingers up in the air. And it was still, it was all anybody talked about for weeks after that. It was by far. And I am a hockey fan because of this team and what they did there. I still watch Olympic hockey to this day. And the other thing about it is this. Someday we could see a heavyweight champion that's that big of a favorite lose to a guy that's that big of an underdog. We're never going to see a group of amateurs beat a group of professionals in Olympic hockey or any kind of Olympics ever again because it can't happen.
It's going to be hard to. Hey, talk about that.
Well, can't because everybody's a pro now at every damn thing.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And you're talking about that run for the U.S. hockey team. The performance Jim Craig put on in that game against Russia, trying to hold off You talk about all the shot attempts. Jim Craig was a man amongst boys in that game as I was reading through about this last year. And of course, the job Herb Brooks did getting this team ready, that's to tell you just how glued in they were
How about
against the
this? I would make the
massive
claim
power.
that the only better coaching job that I've ever seen outside of Kurt Signetti was what Herb Brooks did to win that game. And when you read in depth the adjustments he made during that
Yes.
first quarter to be able to win that game in the way that they played all four lines, and most times their guys would only be on the ice for 30 to 40 seconds. The Russians shorten their bench, they get a little bit tired. And that
Hmm.
last 10 minutes, I mean, from watching that in person, seemed like it took 10 days. And in those last 10 minutes, the Russians had 9 shots. 2 of them hit the goalpost. The
Yeah.
Americans had 2.
Yeah, it was they were coming on, and and I remember watching the replay, just the actual game of it. It felt like you was watching that whole thing for about a week because it felt like it was never going to end, especially toward the end of that game when Russia was coming on. If you were a U.S. fan, you're probably biting your nails, wondering, "Come on, end this, let's get this." And here
Well, the
comes this
bad thing,
power.
I watched the game on replay a few
Yeah.
times. And even on replay, that 10 minutes seems like it takes forever.
Yes, and you're just like, "End this. We got to win this." And of course, the final countdown was just, even
Yeah.
that took
Al
forever.
Michaels'
Final seconds.
call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes. And
And
not only
then you
was the
get
world.
the end of the Finland game. The
Yeah.
impossible dream comes true. And I
Yes.
mean, it's what made Al Michaels the biggest swinging dick in announcing. I mean, after that, I mean, he was doing everything before, but he was even on a larger scale. He got big enough where he could even force Howard Cosell out of doing World Series games by the time you get to
Yes.
1985.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the night that introduced us to a broadcasting phenom, which was Al Michaels also, and
Yeah.
that's what made it even greater.
And Ken Dryden was outstanding too. And he
Yes,
went
he
on to
was.
do hockey for a long time. And did you know that actually the number one guy that was supposed to do that game was Keith Jackson, who could not do the Olympics that year?
Yeah, I read something about
And
that.
I don't think the last 5 seconds of the game, him screaming "Whoa, Nelly," would have been near as good as "Do you believe in
Oh no,
miracles?"
it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't.
But
And Keith Jackson is phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. Keith Jackson was phenomenal, but Al Michaels' call on that was his perfection.
yeah, and that will live forever. Just like Russ Hodges call Bobby Thompson's home run in the ninth inning to win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant. And we don't get broadcasters like that anymore. Hell, Al Michaels isn't even like that anymore. It just seems
Mm-mm.
like a pissed off dude that's ready to retire, but doesn't have anything else to do.
Right.
At least he doesn't have to work with Chris Collinsworth anymore, though.
Yeah, yeah, probably the best thing for him.
I like Chris Collinsworth.
I do a little bit, but I do a little bit, but yeah, I think for him, he can work. Al Michaels is the first guy I've seen as a broadcaster who can work with anybody, and anybody he works with is like it clicks, and that's
Yeah.
what made Al Michaels great. Especially we talk about with this call of the Olympics with Ken Dryden. I still remember the closed circuit version of the Hagler Hearns fight. He called with Al Bernstein.
Yeah.
They were phenomenal with that one. So to a C,
Yeah.
and of
Michaels
course,
could call on it. He could call dogs, racing to see who could take the biggest shit, and it would be exciting.
yes, that's a perfect way to put it.
Probably not. But it's the only thing that came to my head, and whatever comes in my head usually comes out of my mouth. It is my big all about my biggest issue. But
Yeah.
all right, Sirhan, you've got a X page also, correct? You want to tell people where they can find you?
Yes, the handle is on X. The handle is called Serhan on X. I host a live stream show sometimes once a night, wherever my schedule entails, at 8 p.m. for the most parts. I cover all sports topics from past to present, which helps people understand what I lived through, what I understood to try and help people for the present. How they take the knowledge is up to them, but it's something I enjoy doing. You can catch it every weeknight at 8 o'clock. I also my show's also streamed on some of the others audio sites like iHeartRadio and Spotify, where all of a sudden my iHeartRadio downloads have gone through the roof all of a sudden. So I don't know how that entailed. But on my X platform, if you want to follow me, the handle is Serhan on X. You can follow me there. All sports topics, all eras, all the time, as well as in the late night show at 8 o'clock every night. I touch on current sports and historical events, most notably boxing, which everybody knows boxing is always going to be my passion.
Well, we need to do a boxing debate show too at some point. I just don't know if you're old
Yes.
enough to do it. You gave up way too easy on this, by the way. All right, guys. We will bring Serhan back unless I get a listener right now to put a message on one of the boards saying, "Do not bring him back." It has to happen in the next 10 seconds. There, we ended 10 seconds early. That way we don't have to worry about it. All right, guys, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe on YouTube, especially the like button. Make sure you hit that. Myself and Steve Risley will be back with the Indiana basketball show on Monday at 1 o'clock to talk about the Indiana versus Illinois game. And Serhan, we just need to find something else we agree about. Say something stupid real quick to see if we agree or disagree. But, so I want to thank Serhan. Make sure you check him out. But for now, for Serhan, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.